Is it audible? Okay, good evening students. Today we are going to cover the important current affairs that have happened in the last week. Okay, so this is the third week of uh, current affairs that we are covering for the December month. Okay, after this only 1 month is left. So we will be starting with the important topics that have been covered in this week, right? So starting with our first issue that is related to the topic of environmental pollution and degradation, right? Particularly when we talk about pollution, we are talking about the air quality, okay, air quality as well as the constituents that make air quality deteriorate, okay, air quality, right? And therefore we have multiple measures in which we have air quality index. We can gauge the effect of PM 2.5, that is the particulate matters 2.5, PM 10, we have sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and so on, right? So in the recent event, the news is that Delhi has gone forward for the graded response action plan 4. Okay, that means GRAP 4. It has been implemented in Delhi NCR. NCR is the National Capital Region, right? That means the adjacent districts of the states around Delhi. So these many parts are known to be notorious for the pollutants emissions there, right? And therefore there has been implementation of GRAP 4. GRAP 4 is a step of actions, okay? It proceeds from one stage to the other, okay? In these, what happens is that after one stage, after a level of AQI has crossed, then it will kick in with GRAP 2. Then if more amount of concentration of pollutants is there in the air quality index, then we will move on to GRAP 3 and so on and so forth. So GRAP 4 is the highest level of action plans that is constituted for all the industries, or you could say construction activities or vehicles that are plying, okay? And in this kind of a case, what should the population do? That are the directives given under this GRAP 4. Okay, so let us understand that why this has happened. On December 13th, 2025, it has plunged, the air quality index, it has plunged to severe plus levels, right? This means that the air quality index has crossed the 450 mark, and that has happened for a number of days, and therefore this has led to the kicking in of GRAP 4. Okay, it is a critical intervention designed to protect public health. So it is almost like a public health emergency where a prolonged exposure to these particulate matters can create health issues like respiratory diseases, for example, asthma, bronchitis, okay, pulmonary diseases, right? So let us learn more about this. First of all, why does this happen in Delhi in winters? Okay, let us understand this. Why does this happen in Delhi? First of all, why it was activated? First, the thing was AQI levels are high. It is already 450 plus. Okay, this much amount of air quality index has deteriorated. All right. The second thing is meteorological crisis. Okay, meteorological crisis. This means that the wind patterns are not up to this level. They are not up to the level, the velocity is not up to the level that can flush out the pollutants that are created within the cities. Okay, within this city, a lot of pollutants, for example, from you could have from pollution from the industries, from the construction and demolition wastes, all kinds of pollution are there, but there is low wind velocity. Now what this low wind velocity will do? It will let the pollutants accumulate over a period of time, and then it will get converted into haze, smog. These kind of things will start happening. Okay. One is low wind speeds. The other meteorological crisis is temperature inversion. Friends, in temperature inversion, you must have read in geography, what happens is that there is a layer of air that traps. Okay. What happens in winter is you will have long cold nights. Okay, you know the temperature would not be as much just above the ground surface. If this is your ground, then cold air would be here, right? Cold air would be here near the ground surface. It means that cold air, we also know that it is dense in nature, and the warm air would be acting like a cap. It is a cap over the cold air. Okay, this means that combined with low wind velocity, it will result into trapping of all the pollutants. It will have nowhere to go, right? These pollutants will have nowhere to go because of one, low wind velocity, and the second, because it is being trapped by the warm air above it. That is the result of temperature inversion, right? It creates a toxic atmospheric dome that creates public health problems, right? Then emergency decision. Okay, there was emergency decision. There's a statutory body by the name of Commission for Air Quality Management. Commission for Air Quality Management, and that has been constituted specifically for such kind of pollution related problems, right? Specifically in Delhi NCR, right? So they have kicked in this kind of emergency decision, and there was emergency meeting, and the strictest protocol was invoked so that this can be suppressed at the earliest, right? So let us learn more about this. Now we have to understand GRAP, that is the pollution emergency framework. Okay, what it is about. Okay, we will also see what are the measures invoked, like GRAP 1, 2, 3 and 4. These stages response, when does it kick in? Okay, at what quantity of deteriorating air quality index does it kick in? Okay, the first thing is understanding that it has a legal foundation. Okay, legal foundation, it was approved by Supreme Court in 2016. Friends, it is very important to understand that most of the environmental questions will make you write about this particular case, MC Mehta case. Okay, particularly in 2016, this was put forward in the MC Mehta case, and it gained a statutory backing. It gained a statutory backing, this graded response action plan, through the statutory backing of Commission for Air Quality Management Act of 2021, right? Now the second part is that it is a stage in which we understand that the air quality is degrading, right? The stages are from poor to hazardous categories, right? The core objective is that I must replace the ad hoc pollution bans with rule-based predictable interventions that activate automatically based on measurement of air quality thresholds. Okay, friends, what earlier used to happen was that there would be a deteriorating air quality, and then the government would scramble for understanding what are the measures that they need to put forward so that such kind of air pollution can be suppressed, right? It was not linked to a particular number. Okay, it was not linked to a particular activity on how to suppress it. Okay, so there was no control activity, there was no kick-in activity, kick-in of air pollution controlling activities, which would lead to, because they are linked with the AQI. Now GRAP would involve that these should be linked to the actual AQI numbers, and this should be automatically activated. There should be no loss of time in governmental intervention, right? So this is an automatic created that it will kick in for sure. Okay, and everyone has a prediction. Everyone knows that if such kind of thing happens, then what will be the results? Okay, what will be the effects that would take place, right? So it would be an automated procedure. It will kick in as and when the deteriorating air quality occurs. Moving forward, let us just have a look at the 4 stages of the GRAP. So GRAP 1 is understanding from the poor point of view that air quality has deteriorated to the poor quality. That is when your air quality index is between 200 to 300, right? So preventive measures including dust control. Okay, your construction is one of the important pillars of creating pollution in Delhi. Vehicle checks, because of the higher population density. Okay, 2011 census has said that between 1 kilometer square, there is nearly about 13 to 14,000 people living, and that will also result into huge amount of vehicle population leading to pollution, right? So there must be preventive measures on vehicle checks, public advisories. So we should have early interventions. Okay, we should not let the GRAP 1 to go to GRAP 2. Okay, let us see if it goes to GRAP 2, it is measured as very poor and the air quality index lies between 300 to 400, right? So there would be enhanced restrictions on polluting industries. Okay, there are highly polluting industries within the city. Okay, and therefore when it enters the category of very poor, they would be made to comply to standards so that they are not deteriorating the air quality any further. Okay, stricter vehicle regulations and intensified monitoring of construction sites. Okay, even the construction demolition waste continues to create a lot of pollution within the city. Then when it goes to severe, it is between 401 to 450. And then the last part, wherein most strictest penalties have occurred, and it is a cause of public health concern, and therefore the strictest of norms would be kicking in. The emergency protocols are activated. It is a ban, complete construction ban, that there must not be any kind of construction activities going on into the cities of Delhi NCR. Okay, then truck entry restrictions. You must understand, friends, like Delhi is at the junction of a lot of places. Okay, it is a very resourceful region when it comes to logistics. Okay, so a number of trucks would cross that path during the night time. Okay, and that also creates a lot of pollution. And then along with that, you will have temperature inversion. All of this will create huge amount of pollution. So there would be restrictions on entry of trucks. Then hybrid schooling. Okay, because we understand that children would be the ones who would be exposed. Okay, and when they're growing up, when they're exposed to such kind of air quality, poor quality or very severe air quality index, then it will have a effect throughout their lives, right? Then mandatory work from home policies. That means even with respect to the offices, okay, there is work from home policies that will, one, it will cut down the transport part, which leads to vehicle exhausts, and the second, it will downgrade the effects of exposure to prolonged air quality, right? Now, what are the measures, immediate action that are taken when GRAP 4 kicks in? Okay, one would be transport restrictions. That is complete ban on entry of BS4 diesel trucks into Delhi. Okay, we have known BS4. BS means Bharat Stage vehicles. Okay. Now these are the vehicles which are efficient with respect to the fuels. Okay, the vehicle exhaust that will purify, that will actually absorb the kind of impurities that are coming out in the exhaust, right? With respect to sulfur dioxide. Okay, BS4 will have lesser restrictions. Okay, it will have lesser amount of particulate matters that will be condensed, that will be actually accumulated and filtered out before blowing it out into the atmosphere. Okay, BS6 are the vehicles that are having more amount of filtration, whether it is with respect to PM 2.5, whether it is with respect to the gases, that is sulfur dioxide, all of these would be there in the BS6. That is why BS4 diesel trucks would be something that would be banned, okay, when GRAP 4 is in activation, right? With exceptions only for vehicles carrying essential commodities and emergency services. That is, there is not a complete ban, yes, because we need essential services. There are essential services which are important from public point of view, from welfare point of view, and we cannot stop this, but at least we can stop all the other activities which are not as much necessary or are not as much pressing, right? This targets one of the largest sources of particulate matter emissions, right? This is one of the most important causes of particulate matter emissions, right? This kind of ban would stop that. Then construction shutdown. Total halt to all construction and demolition activities across highways, roads, flyovers, overbridges, power transmission, pipelines and telecom infrastructure. It is a major contributor to PM 2.5 and PM 10 pollution. Okay, understand this. The finer the particulate matter. Okay, particulate matter is a solid particle. Okay, it is so fine that it is less than, even if you take a strand of hair, it is less than 1/10 of the strand of the hair. Okay, the width. So what happens when PM 2.5 is inhaled by the lungs, then it will deposit itself into the lungs so effectively that it will enter your bloodstream also, and it will cause various kinds of diseases, right? So this is also something that is being addressed, that is construction shutdown, which construction and demolition activities produce so many amount of particulate matter, and therefore there are also shutdown in GRAP 4. Educational institutions, hybrid learning mode, implemented for classes 6 to 9 and 11, reducing children's exposure to toxic air while cutting the transport related emissions. Okay, they are targeting two things. One is that the transport related emission should also be cut down. The second thing, that public health with respect to the children who are already in school, they should be allowed to sit at home and study. Okay, because this kind of an exposure would lead to their prolonged deteriorating health. Workplace capacity, public, municipal and private offices to operate at 50% capacity. It is something that will happen, that 50% of the workforce would be operating from the office and the rest 50% would be working from home. Okay, and the next day the switch will happen. Okay, so the 50% people who were working from home will now be working from the office the next day. Okay, so it is just going to help them to deal with the air quality, deteriorating air quality for 2 days or 3 days, right? So with respect to Commission for Air Quality Management, let us understand, because committees, commissions, these are important part of governance structure. Apart from understanding what are the environmental detrimental environmental effects, understanding what is air pollution, understanding what is air quality index, there are also questions on the management. Okay, how it was constituted, what is the statutory backing behind it, when was it constituted, okay, who are the composition, what is the composition of the people who are taking decisions within this commission, right? So Commission for Air Quality Management, it was a statutory body in 2021, it was organized then, and it represents a paradigm shift in addressing Delhi NCR's fragmented air quality governance. Okay, it holds jurisdiction over Delhi and NCR, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan. Understand this, friends, that what happens is it becomes a fragmented policy. Okay, when there are adjoining states and their districts are counted within the national capital region. Okay, so every government can have their own set of rules and regulations. Okay, they might think in a particular direction that maybe environmental problem is with respect to pollution is not as much as in my district, so maybe I can try and go for the economic part. Okay, maybe I can just keep the activities, economic activities running and ignore the environmental part. Okay, so it creates inconsistency in governance policies. with respect to the different states as well as Delhi. Okay, this will lead to differences in the air quality index, and eventually, even if one state is trying to do its best, it will be overcome by the other states. Okay, so there has to evolve a uniform policy, and because of that, CAQM acts as an effective, uniform, and consistent policy maker whenever this graded response action plan is in place. What are the powers? It can issue binding direction to state governments and local authorities. Okay, its decisions are binding on the state governments as well as the local bodies that are applying there, right? It has to override has the power to override state government actions whenever necessary to protect air quality. Okay, now this power gives it an authoritative power. Okay, and because it was set up by the Supreme Court directive in motivation and deriving inspiration from the Supreme Court directive, therefore it is important that even with respect to the states, if they are issuing different kinds of rules and regulations, it can have an overriding effect on their rules and regulations as well when it comes to protecting the air quality, right? The third thing is coordinate region-wide emergency responses across political boundaries. Okay, understand this. While our management and governance is bounded by the states, okay, the boundaries of the states, pollution is not a problem that is limited to the state boundaries. Okay, it has the capacity to cross over and create deteriorating effect even when the state has not done any kind of emissions. Okay, that is particularly visible in the stubble burning case. Okay, most of the times in October, November, this kind of a stubble burning case would come forward where the states in the adjacent areas would burn whatever stubble is left in their agricultural field, and this would lead to higher emissions. Okay, a cost is also something that they would see, cost as well as time. Because in stubble burning, what happens is they will just have 1 liter of kerosene and then they will have a matchstick and then they will burn the field. Okay, it will lead to cleaning of the field in one go. Okay, the alternatives exist, but they are very time consuming as well as costly. That is why most farmers would resort to such kind of practices, and this emission would cross borders and create huge amount of issues with respect to deteriorating air quality in Delhi, right? Then enforce compliance with Supreme Court directives. That whatever the directives have been given by the Supreme Court, it has the mandate to actually implement them, right? Moving forward, let us understand why does Delhi NCR repeatedly face severe air quality crisis. First thing is vehicular emissions. We have seen that huge amount of population density means huge amount of vehicle density. Huge vehicle density means more exhaust gases released through the vehicles that are plying. That means continuous nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, and volatile organic compound emissions. Okay, traffic congestion amplifies the problem during peak hours. Okay, we have understood that whenever these kind of volatile organic compounds are there, it will act in presence of sunlight and it will lead to smog. Okay, what is known as photochemical smog. Then there is construction dust. There is year-round infrastructure development that generates substantial amount of PM10 and PM2.5, right? Then biomass burning. Okay, crop residue burning in October, November, and waste burning throughout the year add massive pollution during the critical periods. Okay, it is the time for the next crop cycle for the agricultural fields in Haryana. Okay, that is the reason there would be stubble burning, and this emissions would further create pollution problems. Geography. Okay, geography of Delhi is as such that it is landlocked, and it is also said to be at a lower elevation level. This means all the air surrounding it in the districts, whatever pollution is being created, it will accumulate in this landlocked region. Okay, and then what will happen? The seasonal factors. That means the wind velocity will also be less, That means the pollutions are not getting flushed out, it is accumulating, and it also has a cap with respect to temperature inversion. Okay, low wind speeds in winter prevent pollutant dispersal, and it is create perfect storm for pollution accumulation. Then industrial emissions are also there. Industrial activities will release pollutants continuously. Okay, a lot of industries are there that have been set up for a very long time, and they are quite often not complying with the standards which are required for the pollution to be deteriorating. Okay, they are often not compliant, highly polluting industries. Okay, so all of this will lead to air quality being severe, and then Delhi moving towards the Graded Response Action Plan 4. Okay, so the path forward, the whole issue is that we should not wait for GRAP 4. We should not go for GRAP 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Okay, the preventive measures should be there already in place so that we don't have a situation for severe air quality index, right? And therefore there are some things which can be done at an immediate level, some short-term levels, at medium terms and the long term. Okay, let us look at them one by one. So enhance air quality forecasting systems. Okay, what you measure will get managed, right? If you don't measure it, it will not get managed. So forecasting, okay, extrapolating with respect to the previous year's data. Let us understand how the air quality can deteriorate over a period of time, at what date what will happen. And therefore I can have some amount of preventive measures in place already before I reach to such a stage. Okay, and then prevention is better than cure, right? So forecasting systems will help me to extrapolate any such kind of emergency issues. Okay, and enforce this year round, so that your data tells you exactly when and what situations will be created, right? Short term, strengthen local enforcement mechanisms and compliance monitoring, improve coordination between CAQM and municipal authorities. Okay, the next short term effect would be that we can have a compliance between the CAQM as well as the local authorities. Okay, that they should at least, because these are the ones who are operating at the level where they can monitor, okay, where they can implement what are the measures that are given by CAQM, what are the directives given by GRAP. Okay, so these implementation must be done and the coordination must be smooth. Medium term, accelerate clean transport transition with electric vehicles and improved public transit. Okay, understanding that the vehicle density has to go down for pollution to go down. Okay, so therefore we must promote the use of electric vehicles in the medium term. And also, people who are not able to afford, there must be a rapid public transport system. Okay, upgrade industrial emission standards and waste management infrastructure. Okay, oftentimes there is very unsustainable way of managing the waste. Okay, and a city like Delhi, which produces huge amount of waste, whether it is e-waste, plastic waste, construction and demolition waste, still it is being used, the waste is managed in a very unsustainable manner. Okay, you must have read about the landfills. Okay, landfills that have caught fire over and over time. Okay, they look like mountains. So there must be a waste management system, because that is also going to create huge amount of emissions. Long term, shift from seasonal firefighting to structural reforms. Integrate GRAP with National Clean Air Program and strengthen airshed-based governance beyond NCR boundaries. Okay, that there must be a holistic approach to this kind of a air pollution problem, right? The governance must be integrated, and it should also be integrated with the National Clean Air Program. Okay, it should not be segmented, right? Because we understand it as an environmental problem that has no political boundaries, right? So next topic, understanding mangroves. Okay, the next issue is mangroves as ecological buffers. Okay, there has been a study that has found that how does mangrove tolerate such a huge amount of salt concentration. Friends, you already know that mangroves are a part of the transition zone between aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems, right? And therefore it is important to study them as and when we are facing the problem of climate change. Okay, so there has been increased heat, there has been increased amount of sea surface temperature, and because these are ecosystems which are present and are facing the consequences of huge amount of temperature rise, therefore we have to study them to understand how they are coping up with this kind of a temperature stress, right? So there has been a new research that has found that how do mangroves master salt water survival? Okay, because they are embedded into the water systems. Okay, and it is a salt water where they are embedded, right, where they are planted, and within that there is huge amount of osmotic pressure. Okay, osmotic pressure, and with respect to increased temperature as well as anaerobic conditions, because those areas are waterlogged, therefore there are less amount of oxygen concentrations present within that system. Okay, so when they are exposed to such kind of environmental stressors, how do they cope up? Okay, so the first is unique cellular architecture. Okay, understanding osmosis, it is about if we separate two liquids, okay, which has solute particles and solvent particles, then if we separate them through a semi-permeable membrane, then the concentration on both the sides of the semi-permeable membrane would be equal. That means the number of particles of solute divided by the volume of solvent, right? This is what happens in the roots of mangroves as well, right? This is how the plant physiology works. But understanding it deeply, we also see that there is a unique cellular architecture which also helps the mangroves to survive in high salt concentrations. Okay, high salt concentrations will lead to water loss. Okay, it will lead to water loss. But that is something that is sustained by the mangroves. And why is that? Because they possess smaller epidermal pavement cells and significantly thicker cell walls. Okay, so suppose in the cell you have the turgor pressure. Okay, the pressure is there, and now when you are exposing it to high salt concentration solvent on the outside, the semi-permeable membrane would lead to the water in the inside of the cell to be pulled out, and that will lead to the pressure being released, and therefore the cell will collapse, and that will result into the dead plants. But that is not what happens in mangroves. Okay, because they are protected by smaller epidermal pavement cells. Okay, and they have thicker cell walls. Because of thicker cell walls, what will happen? They will resist the pressure, and therefore the cell wall won't collapse. The cell won't collapse as a whole because the cell walls will be thicker in nature, right? They would also possess epidermal pavement cells, which means that the pressure due to the salt concentration would not be high as compared to a normal plant, right? It provides mechanical strength to withstand low osmotic potential in salt water environments. Okay, then there is dual salt management systems. Okay, once it is exposed to high amount of salt concentration, then it should also release whatever huge amount of salt buildup has happened within the system. Okay, so it has two types of salt water management system. One is through the waxy root barriers that filter seawater. Okay, from the beginning itself, when it is exposed to the seawater, it is going to exclude the salt that is highly there. Okay, the other would be accumulating the salt internally and excreting it through specialized leaf glands. Okay, on the leaves of these plants, you will find that there is accumulation of salt particles. Okay, so it has dual salt management systems, which means one is that the roots will stop those high salt concentration water, the salts to enter. Okay, then the second thing is when they enter also, there would be internal buildup, and therefore it will be excreted out of the leaf, right? Then this study is also pointing towards remarkable evolutionary success, because mangroves have independently evolved Okay, they have undergone this evolution process 30 times across 200 million years. Okay, just these unique cellular architecture, it has gone through a process of evolution, and that to 30 times in the last 200 million years. Okay, so this is a very groundbreaking study, right? So let us now understand what happens with respect to the agricultural implications. Okay, because we are facing so many adverse climate effects. Let us understand, when we talk about the climate resilient agriculture, we also talk about the reducing oxygen levels, or with respect to reducing nutrient levels, or with respect to having anaerobic conditions, with respect to having increased amount of temperature that will force and break the osmotic pressure or the turgor pressure in the cells of the plants. Okay, so understanding this kind of a cellular architecture for mangroves will lead to climate resilient crop engineering. Okay, understanding mangrove cell wall properties and cellular dimensions, it could enable the development of salt tolerant varieties of staple crops, right? The second thing is, it will also help us to understand and treat soil salinization. Okay, how there are some soils that are saline in nature, that will have higher amount of salts. Okay, how can we address them? This could also be a possible implication with respect to agriculture. Then policy framework integration aligns with National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture and SDG 313 climate action goals, right? It also connects with the sustainable development. Then breakthrough research directions, focused genetic modification on cell size and wall composition could yield transformative agricultural applications within next decade. Okay, so it is a very groundbreaking study that can have future implications, particularly important with respect to India, as because a huge amount of population is dedicated in the agricultural sector. Okay, now let us understand the mangrove ecosystem. Okay, what are the conditions that are favorable? Okay, once we have understood, okay, this is the unique cell architecture, then what are the conditions in which these mangrove are particularly found? Salt tolerant trees and shrubs, particularly halophytes. Halophytes meaning the plants that love salt, high salt concentrations. Okay, and they are remarkable ecosystems, flourish in conditions hostile to most plant life. Okay, that makes it important to study with respect to the climate change. Okay, what is that? The saline water is there, aerobic soils, and always twice a time it is going to be flooded. Right, ideal growing conditions are high rainfall, okay, 1000 to 3000 meter annually. Warm temperatures are required by mangroves, 26 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius. Slow moving sediment rich waters. Okay, it is very difficult for a plant to survive in these conditions, but these are the ideal growth conditions for mangroves. Okay, because it has certain kind of adaptations. Okay, adaptations because we have gone through such a process of evolution so many times, 30 times in last 200 million years, though therefore they have developed such kind of adaptations. It is possible that such kind of adaptations did not exist in the beginning. It was only because of the environmental stressor that these adaptations have occurred. Okay, pneumatophores, specialized aerial roots that enable respiration because it is waterlogged, because there is less amount of oxygen levels. Okay, how will they breathe? It is through these. Okay, these pencil-like structures that are sticking out of the soil. Okay, these are the ones that are called pneumatophores. Prop roots, these are the hanging roots. Okay, they are important for balancing the structure of mangroves. Okay, lenticulated bark, this also leads to oxygen exchange because anaerobic conditions prevail, right? Then it is important for us to understand what is the distribution. Okay, if mangroves are such useful things, then what is the distribution with respect to India, right? So ISFR, that is Indian State of Forest Report 2023, it states that there is 4,991.68 kilometers square of mangroves in India. And the states with highest amount of these mangrove ecosystems is first West Bengal, then Gujarat, then Andaman and Nicobar, and then other regions, right? So close to this much percentage is there in West Bengal, right? And they are also protected. Okay, whenever we talk about ecosystems and their contribution with respect to the biodiversity, we also understand if they are having any kind of legislations to protect them, to conserve them. So yes, we have it under Environmental Protection Act of 1986, which declares them as ecologically sensitive areas with 50-meter buffer zones. That is, there should be nothing that should deteriorate the mangrove conditions within the 50-meter area radius, right? Then compensatory requirements, that if you are going for replacement, if you are going to take out the mangroves from their native places, then you have to go for compensatory afforestation of such kind of mangroves, 3:1 replantation ratio, right? Additional safeguards are mentioned under Wildlife Protection Act, Indian Forest Act, and Biological Diversity Act. All right. Then why do they matter? First of all, climate change mitigation. Climate change mitigation, that they are exceptional blue carbon sinks. Okay, we understand carbon sinks. They are basically storing carbon for a longer period. Okay, so they are quite exceptional because they sequester 7.5 to 10 times more carbon per acre than even the tropical rainforest. We always talk about even our nationally determined contributions, we have said that we will have carbon sinks nearly about 2.5 to 3 tons, right? So tropical rainforest se bhi zyada it will store carbon, right? Disaster risk reduction, that is, it is like a nature based solution. Okay, nature based solution which stops it. It is a natural barrier against storm surges, tsunamis, and coastal erosion. Okay, it stops the wave energy that is coming twice a day. Okay, it stops that kind of coastal erosion. Okay, and therefore it also supports livelihood. Because of the ecosystem, there would be multiple ecosystem services that is being provided with respect to biodiversity, in the respect of animals as well as plants. These plants are also used as medicines in a lot of communities that are around this place. Okay, so it also provides livelihood support and biodiversity conservation. It is a home to a huge amount of biodiversity. We understand that it is a transition zone between terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. Therefore, the biodiversity is supposed to be high, right? And therefore, it serves as a habitat for them, right? So these are very important parts, and we should understand the science behind it so that we can apply it to our climate smart agriculture, climate resilient agriculture, and also under our national mission for sustainable agriculture. So the next issue is about biodiversity and understanding how evolution process takes place. Okay, so the topic is anthropause and evolution. Anthropause and evolution in urban birds. Okay, urban. Okay, anthropause. What is anthropause? It means that if there is a stop to human interventions, then does it change any kind of evolutionary things in the urban birds? Okay, specifically talking about urban, because the human interventions are very high in urban spots. Okay, so it has been found in a study that COVID-19 lockdown has created an understanding of how the evolutionary processes take place. Okay, so it has led to created an unprecedented anthropause, that is a global slowdown in human activity that offered scientists a rare natural experiment. It was a natural experiment. It was not something that was intended to be seen. Okay, because evolution was understood to be over a period of time, over a long ecological period of time, right? And it was observed in dark-eyed junco. It is a sparrow, right? So let us study about this. The global pause button. Okay, the global pause button was when COVID happened. Okay, earlier what used to happen was that people used to keep out food, okay, food for these birds. Now, because the human intervention was there, they had a certain kind of a beak. Okay, so conditions it has not seen. Okay, how urban wildlife responded when humans who had shaped the environment for decades suddenly withdrew from the landscape. Okay, what happened was, because these birds were being fed and there were human interventions as well, right, and they were fed by the humans, so what will happen, the beaks of these birds would develop into something else, okay, because they have been getting fed from the human interventions. But during the COVID lockdown, what happened was these kind of human interventions stopped. Now once the human interventions have stopped, what will it result into? It will result into them getting their beaks more in a manner that is concordant with their wild counterparts, okay, that is not being fed by the humans in the urban areas. Okay, so the problem was the understanding. It created a new understanding and it also created a challenge for our understanding of evolutionary processes. The thing that we have thought that okay, it will occur over a period of time and it will take a long time for such kind of changes to occur. This change of beak within, suppose say 4 to 5 years, creates an understanding that evolutionary processes can have lower amount of time for changes to be seen. Okay, so let us understand how the morphological changes have taken place starting from the pre-pandemic period. Pre-pandemic period, before the lockdowns were there, dark-eyed juncos developed short, thick beaks adapted for eating human food, waste breadcrumbs, processed foods, and so on. Okay, human food. Then, when lockdown happened, the food waste vanished, and in 2021-2022 developed longer natural wild type beaks. Okay, it did not wait for the human intervention to come back into place after the lockdown. It actually adapted at that point of time and its beak became longer, natural, and concordant with the wild type beaks. Okay, reverting to the morphology suited for their ancestral diets. The man-made interventions. Right? Post-lockdown return, once human activity resumed, the characteristic of urban beak shape returned in subsequent generations. This means that they started from, because of human intervention, short, thick beaks. Then, when there was lockdown, then it resulted into longer, natural, wild type. And once lockdown was over, it reverted back to this. Okay, so this is what the evolutionary change tells us. Okay, it is quite intriguing and interesting to note this. Okay, so understanding broader wildlife response, that this was about the dark juncos or the birds, but what are the wildlife responses? Have we observed something else also with respect to the wildlife pre-lockdown and post-lockdown? So yes, there are quieter bird songs. Okay, there is reduced ambient noise from traffic and human activity. Urban birds have adjusted their vocalizations, singing at a lower volume. Earlier they used to sing at a higher volume, right? Because of the urban noise. Urban wildlife movement. Animals have ventured because the space that was being occupied by humans, now these spaces are empty for them to move in, right? So their home range has also been increasing. Then behavioral shifts have altered their activity patterns, foraging times, social behaviors in response to temporary absence, right? So all of these have been observed as a wildlife response to the reduced human intervention. Okay, so basically what it does is it challenges our evolutionary knowledge of evolution as a whole, and says that there might be, some short amount of duration in which the evolution can occur. Okay, it is for protecting the species, right? So this is an interesting study with respect to anthropause. Okay, the next issue is again related to air quality index and the deteriorating air quality. there has been a research that has found that there are inhalable microplastics and they are also very problematic for the health. Okay, they behave like fine particulate matter only. Okay, they behave like fine particulate matter, and it has said that they have detected inhalable microplastics floating in atmosphere of major Indian cities. Okay, another problem with respect to inhalable microplastics is that that it will also lead to longer time in the air. Okay, it floats in the air for a prolonged period of time. That means the exposure, even if you are out there, you will not expect it to settle down. Okay, it will enter the lungs and it will enter the bloodstream also, right? So let us understand about this. So with respect to understanding what are inhalable microplastics, these are plastic particles smaller than 10 micrometers. Okay, 10 micrometers, very, very small, right? And unlike larger microplastics, they quickly settle on the surfaces. These ultra fine particles remain suspended in air for a extended period, right? Then microscopic contaminants now join the familiar pollutants like PM2.5 and PM10. Earlier we were just noting down with respect to air quality index, what is PM2.5, what is PM10, okay, what are the levels, and therefore we will decide what is the air quality at present point of time. But inhalable microplastics create another measure of pollutant, okay, that we have to measure this also because it is also something that can cause issues, right? One more issue related to inhalable microplastics is that they are a carrier. Okay, they are a carrier for a lot of pollutants that can have adverse effects on the health, right? They are carrier and they are released by what? Released through the common items like synthetic textiles, which are made out of polyester and nylon fibers, vehicle wear with respect to the tire as well as the brake particles, packaging breakdown. Okay, microplastics or these inhalable plastics which are generated are ones that are created by the common items that we use in everyday life. Okay, so this becomes a huge amount of source for such kind of microplastics. Okay, now with respect to understanding where are they situated, okay, with respect to understanding what is the air quality with respect to the cities when such kind of inhalable microplastics are in the air. So it has been understood that Delhi and Kolkata, significantly higher exposure is there. With respect to Mumbai and Chennai, relatively lower levels are there. Okay, for the very reason that coastal parts will have huge amount of air circulation and therefore the pollutants will have a space to move out, right? And that is something that is very challenging when it is landlocked, like in Delhi and Kolkata. Okay, it is limited coastal wind dispersion is there, higher population density is there, there is waste management systems that are poor in nature. Fee is something that is not letting these pollutants to be flushed away. Okay, now this becomes a blind spot. Okay, because we have been measuring under our air quality index, we have been measuring so many gases, we have been measuring the particulate matters, but we have not been measuring this, and therefore this creates a blind spot that are we actually seeing what pollutant is there, okay, understanding its effect and what kind of long-term health consequences it can have on our population, right? So first of all, it is not captured by our air quality index. It only monitors, air quality index only monitors these PM 2.5, 10, SO2, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, ozone, lead and ammonia, but it misses inhalable microplastics. Then prolonged airborne suspension. Okay, they have extremely low gravitational settling velocity. It means that they will not settle very easily on the surface. Okay, they will remain suspended in the air for a longer period of time, and that suspension will lead to more exposure. Okay, if you are out there in the open and you will expect that those particles will settle down, no, it will remain in the air and it will also enter into your breathways, right? Toxic co-pollutant carriers. This is another very big problem because these behave like a vehicle for another types of dangerous substances and heavy metals like lead, cadmium that have endocrine disrupting chemicals such as phthalates directly into the respiratory system. Okay, so it is not just dangerous on its own, it is also carrying the other pollutants, okay, which are deteriorating for our health. Okay, so what are the human exposure daily? Okay, especially in cities like Delhi and Kolkata, 132 microgram daily microplastic inhalation is there. Okay, the particle size threshold decides how fine the particles are and whether it will reach your bloodstream. 5 major cities were studied, and with respect to this, it was ascertained that these are also something that must be included in air quality index and understood, and the effects must be studied. Okay, they have deep lung penetration because of their finer size. Trojan horse effect, which means that not just on their own, even if they look like unsuspicious objects, they are carriers. They are carriers of dangerous substances. Okay, like lead. Okay, then disease risk elevation. It links to hormonal disorders, cancer, and antibiotic resistance respiratory infections. Okay, all of these effects will have a huge effect when we understand air pollution as a whole. Okay, next is understanding the microplastic threat. Primary microplastic. Okay, microplastic, first understand that microplastics are ones that are smaller than 5 millimeters in diameter. Okay, and even tinier nanoplastics are ones that are measuring below 100 nanometers, so small particles. Okay, so they will have primary microplastics. They are deliberately manufactured. What is the source? When we understand that, we understand that they are deliberately manufactured. Okay, and it is there in your everyday products. Everyday products like microbeads are there in cosmetics and toothpaste. Plastic pellets for industrial manufacturing. Synthetic fibers that shed from polyester and nylon clothing during washing cycles. All of these would become the source of pollution with respect to inhalable microplastics. Then secondary microplastics. Primary were the ones that are manufactured on their own up until this size, and now secondary ones which are actually through the breakdown. Okay, that breakdown, for example, bottles, bags, packaging, it break down over time and therefore it will release microplastics. Fishing nets, then degradation that is caused by environment itself, sunlight, heat, mechanical abrasion, and waves, right? So that was about the air quality with respect to inhalable microplastics and how it should be included with understanding of air pollution as a whole. Okay, moving on to the next topic, National Energy Conservation Awards 2025. Okay, it is about increasing the energy efficiency of the appliances that we have. Okay, so on National Energy Conservation Day 2025, celebrated annually on December 14th, President of India presented the prestigious National Energy Conservation Awards in Delhi. Okay, so these are important. It can be quoted in your mains answers also about the, if you want to read about the awards and what kind of best practices are there, then you can quote these awards also in your mains answers. Okay, so these awards are basically for recognizing the excellence in energy efficiency, how efficient your energy is, okay, and how clean it is, understanding all of these things. So it is with respect to the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Okay, it was constituted in 1991 and it acknowledges and celebrates the energy conservation across India. These 5 sectors are there: manufacturing and industrial facilities, commercial buildings and office complexes, transportation and logistics sector, education and healthcare institutions, and energy efficient appliance and manufacturers. Okay, in governance architecture, it is being asked that what is this bureau and when was it constituted, whether it is a statutory body or not. Okay, so Bureau of Energy Efficiency, it is a statutory body and it was established in 2002, 1st of March, under Energy Conservation Act of 2001, right? So it plays a crucial role in formulating policies and strategies to reduce the energy intensity of the economy. Okay, energy intensity has to be reduced. That is what is the goal of Bureau of Energy Efficiency. It invests in programs like standards and labeling program, understanding with respect to the appliances that you have, whether they are 4 stars or 5 stars, okay, understanding how much energy efficient your electric appliance is. Carbon credit trading system, okay, it is with respect to understanding how much emissions do the industries have, okay, and with respect to that, if they have carbon credits or not. If they have surplus carbon credits that they are emitting lower than what they were supposed to, then they can also deal with them, convert them into carbon credits with respect to the amount of tons that have been released, and these tons can then be traded, okay, with respect to the carbon credit. Possibly someone having a surplus carbon credit can give it to someone having a deficit, right? Then demand side management, programs designed to optimize electricity consumption patterns and reduce peak demand across sectors. And also it invests in public awareness campaigns, okay? So this was all with respect to the environment and ecology and the current affairs with respect to the third week of December. Thank you so much. I've ended the stream.